Oh man, we're finally live. We did it. It's a miracle. I can't believe this is happening.
Hooray.
Yeah, I know. We really kept y'all waiting, huh? Hello, everyone. I am Nathan Grayson, a reporter at the Washington Post, and this is our weekly video game news show, Story Mode, aka WaPo Stomo for short. It's fun to say. Say it to all your friends. Just say it out loud in your home to no one, whatever you want to do. Anyway, today, we are going to talk about the recent events in the Activision Blizzard lawsuit. And to do that, I am joined by a handful of people, beginning with fellow Washington Post reporter Shannon Liao, who is sitting over there.
Hello.
And then, Shannon, why don't you introduce our two guests who you kindly brought onto the show this week?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so we've got the host of this popular podcast called Opening Arguments. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. We have P. Andrew Torrez, who owns his own law firm, and also his co-host, Thomas Smith, who is a comedian. Is that right, Thomas?
Yeah, we can let the audience decide, I guess.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, so those are our two guests, and I spoke to Andrew for the story that you have up here.
Yeah. So, the kind of story that we're discussing this week. So I got distracted by chat because people are making not jokes, but they're saying things about the name of the show that I enjoy. Like, what are you watching? Wapastomo. But anyway, yeah. So basically, the lawsuit between the Activision Blizzard lawsuit continues to be kind of this nexus point of zaniness in ways that I think people were not even expecting, because the original lawsuit was around gender-based discrimination, inequality, sexual harassment, and things of that nature at Activision Blizzard. That's still ongoing, but there's been this major bump in the road in the form of a conflict between two different government bodies that are looking into these issues at the company. So I'm just going to read directly from Shannon's story to kind of sum up. The ethical violations alleged in Activision Blizzard's filing stem from a feud between the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the EEOC, and the DFEH, which is the Department of Fair Employment and Housing in California. So EEOC is a federal agency, meaning nationwide. DFEH is specific to California. Anyway, two agencies launched separate investigations into these sexual harassment discrimination allegations. The gaming company, Activision Blizzard, moved to settle the EEOC in late September, announcing it would create an $18 million fund to compensate harassment discrimination victims. Courts have yet to approve that. The EEOC, a federal agency, and the DFEH, a state agency, shared jurisdiction over workplace and sexual harassment cases, and both agencies received anonymous tips in 2018 to investigate Activision Blizzard. This is the part that gets kind of wild. The conflict has worsened over disagreement with how much victims should be paid, and concerns that if the EEOC were to settle with Activision Blizzard on a federal level, it could bar the DFE or the DFEH from being able to pursue further damages. And then on top of that, there's this whole other allegation that basically, like, the DFEH is working in ways that are unethical concerning like previous work done on this case at the EEOC. It's all kind of topsy-turvy. And so I guess to like sort of begin in terms of questions for our guests, like how kind of strange and unprecedented is this entire situation, like relative to similar investigations by government bodies over the years? Like, legally speaking, are we in relatively uncharted territory here?
Yeah. A, thank you for the introduction. B, that was, I think, an entirely accurate summary of the state of affairs. And C, to answer the question, I've been practicing a situation like this. Let's go over the similarities really quickly. But we have a situation here where identical or identically simulated whistleblowers called in to both a state agency and a federal agency, both of which are broadly speaking tasked with protecting the workplace from discrimination on various grounds, including on the basis of sex. these two bodies, the California DFA and the federal EEOC, had a workplace sharing agreement in place. They agreed to share information over the course of their investigation, and yet here we are 3 years out. The DFA has brought a lawsuit that remains unsettled with Activision. EEOC wants to settle, and most crucially, what's led to all of this, have objected to California's DFA intervening in that lawsuit for purposes of objecting to that settlement. It's wild, and I'm prepared to go way deeper than that, but I think
Also,
that
I
that
like
kind
that
of
you called
sets the
it.
landscape.
I also like that you called it DFA. We've been struggling the whole time to just say all the letters. It's a great shorthand.
Yeah, finally my wicked nightmare is over. Although DFA sounds like a soccer organization.
Are you saying we broke DFA on WaPo Stomo? We've broken that
Whoa.
news to you? Yeah.
Whoa.
Fantastic.
Now we're talking purely in nonsense terms. It's a great time. By the end of this episode, it's going to be totally unintelligible. People are going to be like, they are not speaking English. But yeah, so I mean, I guess
as
like
a lawyer, I get that all the time.
But yeah, so I mean, like at this point, so to kind of break it down more, the EOC and the DFA, as we I guess can call them now, are arguing over like money and settlements. And I guess like the EEOC has said that it is speculative to say that more money could have been obtained in the settlement. Like, is that accurate? Is there, because it seems like the DFEH wants to pursue, a greater amount of money for victims, whereas the EEOC is like, well, this is what is it, Shannon? Like the second biggest that they've
It's the
ever.
second largest sexual harassment settlement that they would ever have received,
Mhm.
and it's the largest for Los Angeles.
Right. And so, like, I mean, does the DFEH have a leg to stand on here in terms of pursuing more, or is that something that just, as the EEOC is saying, is purely speculative?
Yeah. So let's break that down in a couple of ways. First, we are really speculating that that is DFA's objection. They have not said that in a court filing yet. What we do have is we have a letter requesting a fairness hearing from the Communication Workers Union that covers a significant chunk of Activision employees that has broken it down and basically said $18 million amounts to 6 maximum settlement dollar. In other words, 60 victims to be fully compensated. So when this first broke on September 27th, Thomas and I were covering the story and working in concert with one another, because that's what they do in these cases, in all of these cases, right? It just can't overemphasized that that's the way it's supposed to work. And from that, you would infer, okay, great. This seems like a relatively small, relatively localized problem. And then a week later, the Communication Workers Union wrote in and said, based on our communications, we have reason to believe that that number could be far larger. And DFA said, and also we would like to intervene in this case for purposes of challenging the reasonability of the settlement. And by and large, the only reason to want to challenge the reasonability of the settlement would be the total dollar value. So we still kind of the big issue hanging.
So, I don't know if we lost Andrew. I'll just chime in and say, as the tech person of our show, every time Andrew's voice cuts out, I have a heart attack. So I'm up to like 75 today so far. And I wanted to ask a question because I play the layperson on the show, and that's how it's kind of what we're doing here, try to understand as lay people and non-lawyers what's going on here. I wanted to ask Andrew, why can't we all just get along on this? Like, why can't these two agencies just say, oh, you want 18 million or 9 million or whatever it was? Cool, do that. And then also DFA will come in and we'll do even more. Why can't they just work together like that?
Yeah. And can you all hear me on this now?
Yes,
Back?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for the
great.
people who are only
So-
watching and not in chat. Yeah, so he is on a boat right now, which accounts for a lot of happiness. Yeah. which is great. It's a first for our stream. We've never had someone on a boat before, but it also comes with attendant logistical issues. So we're just going to be
I am
boating right on through
delivering
those.
Yeah, from international waters, which, as far as I can tell, supersedes any legal obligations I might have.
I was going to say,
Usually we do a little
can't commit a
disclaimer,
crime
which
there.
I
That's
say,
a
yeah,
true fact.
that's right. Yeah,
Now's the time
Motley
to ask
Crue and
for
I are
like
here. We're getting ready.
solicit legal advice that he wouldn't normally otherwise give. If you have any
Ooh.
questions on the air, you know.
All right. So hypothetically, if there was a body in that closet right over there, and it's been there for a while then.
for a friend. If they never find a body, just not me, just
Right. Just whatever. Anyway. But, yeah.
It's very hard to prosecute a murder case without a body. I'm just going to say that. Anyway,
Wow. You heard it here first, folks.
You did hear it here on the WaPo. All right. So the answer to that is that federal and state equal protection statutes very often overlap, right? And so here, the EEOC is tasked with upholding Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits an employer from discriminating on the basis of sex in hiring, promotion, firing decisions, right? That overlaps very, very substantially with the California equal protection statutes that are broader, right? And so from a legal perspective, once you've said, we have compromised, we have agreed to settle your Title VII claims, that also settles with it everything that's born out of that same common nucleus of operative facts, right? And so you can't, because the law prevents you from recovering twice for the same injury. So in other words, if there's one conduct and it runs afoul of 2 or 3 or 4 different laws, you have to pick the law under which you're going to recover to get paid. And then once you elect those remedies, you can't then go double dip, triple dip, quadruple dip under all of the remaining laws. Now, as you might imagine, if the way in which you recover under Title VII is a fund that is quickly, all the money is gone, right? You could be left with the grossly inequitable situation of somebody having their claims compromised by a federal settlement and then getting pennies on the dollar or getting nothing. And the EEOC, this is the thing that I cannot emphasize highly enough. They don't want that. Like, why these always work in concert, because you want to, and again, we've seen reference to this agreement. You want to divvy up the workload, right? You don't want 2 different governmental bodies investigating the same conduct. And by the way, that's what supposedly happened here, right? Like DFEH said, we're going to take a look at the harassment claims. You take a look at the pregnancy claims, right? And we're going to share all of that information as we go forward. So all of this breaking down is, again, it works to the benefit of Activision, and it works to the detriment of the clients that these government agencies are supposed to serve.
And this whole situation arose because in 2018, there were anonymous complaints made to the DFEH and also the EEOC at the same time, and so both of these agencies were investigating these complaints. And one of the questions I was asking lawyers as I was speaking to them this week was just, should the anonymous complainers have just only gone through DFEH and not the EEOC so that they can get more money, because 18 million can only last for 60 employees?
Yeah, I don't think that I would point the finger at the whistleblower involved here, because at any point in time, right, the claims could have been cross-referred, right? So, I would say when somebody gets up the courage to a governmental agency on behalf of their employer, like I want to applaud that person rather than like try and come up with a, triple deep, secret ambit of coming up with even more money, right? Like, let's reward the person
as
who,
you said,
who
this
was
is
a
totally
whistleblower.
unprecedented. So how would they have possibly anticipated that these agencies can just work together
Right.
and the best outcome for everybody?
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, yes. I mean, you just mentioned that this works to the advantage of Activision. In what kind of specific ways does this aid Activision? I mean, specifically, like, it sounds like there is a chance that, if things go as bad as they possibly could for DIFA, then basically it's kind of back to the drawing board in this case. But what does that mean? What would DIFA be barred from using in terms of personnel and information and findings?
Yeah, that is a great question, and let me kind of set the timeline to help unpack everything that comes with that question, because that's really kind of what's key here. So on October 8th, over the weekend, that was when the EEOC filed what seemed like a very, very ministerial kind of nothing piece of paper. It was an objection to a motion to shorten time, right? And that's not the kind of thing that usually sets off anyone's radar. But I've been reading everything associated with this case, and I love objections to motion to shorten time. And so I downloaded the thing and went through all of the exhibits, and buried in the exhibits was an objection to the motion to shorten time, because that motion to shorten time was to shorten time for DIFA to join as an intervener in the federal case, to become a part of the federal case. And their reason for saying DIFA should not be a part of the federal case involved a very serious accusation of a breach of legal ethics. One that, by the way, we're going to get to, but I'm not sure is as well founded as I thought might have been on October 8th. So, but basically, EEOC said, hey, look, we had two lawyers that used to work for us. They left. They came to work for you guys. They didn't tell us. You didn't screen them off. You didn't tell us they were going to work for you. And that violates the model rules of professional conduct. And so therefore, we don't want you involved in this case at all. And that was essentially what that filing said. And the second I saw that, I said, well, obviously Activision is going to seize on that. And indeed, 11 days later, right, this Tuesday, Activision in the state case, right, it's the one still open, right? So that objection to motion to shorten time was in the federal EEOC case. That's the one Activision would like to have wrapped up because there's an agreed upon settlement. That's the $18 million. Mm-hmm. They then filed in the state case an emergency motion to stay all proceedings to enable Activision to conduct discovery on the alleged ethical violations to determine what happened and why, right? And on its face, Activision's argument isn't a bad one, right? It is to say, there's a federal agency that says the state agency investigating us may have engaged in serious breaches of ethical conduct. And if they did, then they might have information that they shouldn't have. And if you have information that you shouldn't have in a government investigation, you gotta stop that. You gotta shut that thing down, right? That's not an implausible argument on its face. Yesterday, right? So that was the 19th. Then yesterday, the 20th, we got to see California's reply. And California's reply is sheds a lot of light, but also raises a lot of questions, right? California's reply was to put forward an affidavit from each of the two lawyers that are for the by the way, because of this, and because I've spent 6 hours on LinkedIn, I've now figured out who these two lawyers are. So yeah, if you listen to opening arguments tomorrow, I'm not going to scoop ourselves, but if you listen to our show tomorrow morning,
you got no idea how often LinkedIn is a research reference for Andrew digging through these things. It's kind of funny.
I mean, it's a good one for journalists too. Not gonna lie, LinkedIn.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah. You can. I will tell you, Shannon, offline, but it would not be that hard to reconstruct it. But here's the thing. So DIFA says, look, we've got an affidavit from each of these two former EEOC lawyers that says they never worked in the investigation. They never actively and materially participated in the Activision investigation while at the EEOC. And the reason for that was they're in the law division, and until you bring the lawsuit, that is the investigation stuff is all delegated to the enforcement division. And by the way, looking at their LinkedIn profiles, they were in the law division, right? So that all seems to correspond, right? There's an affidavit from their superior that says, yeah, I supervised these two people. When I interviewed them, they told me they never actively and materially participated in the investigation. So we didn't screen them from working on Activision while coming to DFA. But the minute that the EEOC raised any issue about them, we walled them off just out of utmost concern. And this to me is the key fact. By the way, on October 5th, we sent you those affidavits, and you filed with the court on October 8th, and you did not disclose that we had told you they did not actively and materially participate. And that's the kind of thing that a court would like to know, right? Like I would never represent in an affidavit the facts are X if I have an affidavit from the other party that says the facts are not X, right? Like I would say the facts are X. The other side contends the facts are not X because of 1, 2, and 3. But you always, particularly, over a matter of ethics, right, where the judge is really going to come down to a sense of right and wrong. You fully disclose what you have in front of you. And the final report, I know I'm going on at some length, but the final thing is they revealed the existence of the document and information sharing agreement that I had mentioned in our first set of questions, right? So in other words, there couldn't possibly have been any prejudice to Activision anyway, because DFEH and EEOC had already had an agreement to share all the stuff they came up with in their separate investigations.
That blows my mind. I mean, if they already had an agreement, how could the EEOC even have filed that objection to begin with? Like, isn't that, like really misrepresenting the facts?
It feels that way to me.
So that, I mean, that makes this even more bizarre, right? Like, if that is indeed the case, then what is really the point of any of this?
So I've been asking myself that question a lot for the last 2 weeks, right? And Thomas has been asking me. And so the first
he's been so much fun on his cruise, by the way. He's just been a barrel of laughs on that cruise. Open the doors, like there's papers everywhere. Oh, why are they doing
it? You should see, the reason I have the video shut off is because of the pinball with the twine and
oh yeah.
No, I can figure this out.
So the first thing that came to mind was, okay, these folks left the federal EEOC in 2018 and went 2019 actually, and went to California State DFA. Well, maybe this is an example of, right, the EEOC is an executive agency. Maybe there was some like Trump loyalist who was stuck in to run things and the fix was in, and these folks were concerned about that. That clearly does not seem to be the case, right? The person running this case from the EEOC, her name is Anna Park. She's the LA regional attorney. She's been in that position for 20 years, and she's a career civil servant, public professional, right? Like, she's done a ton of these kinds of cases. She's not, Betsy DeVos, like hiding out, trying to undermine the EEOC. And so it looks like the best I can come up with is it looks like that there was that personality conflicts, right? Like somebody's dirty laundry is getting hung out here because people who were former friends aren't friends anymore. And I say that Anna Park worked very, very closely, tried a case with Lawyer 2, who was at EEOC for 19 years, reached a settlement, right, at the press conference, said, hey, I want to turn things over now to attorney number 2, who, who worked tirelessly on this case, was the lead attorney, and, knows everything about this particular case. That was an age discrimination case. It was about a company that fired everybody over the age of 40 on one day and then listed in the newspaper all of those jobs and hired a bunch of people in their 20s and 30s.
They were seeking to be the textbook example that lawyers get taught of, like, this is age discrimination.
It really was.
They were like, we can go down in history.
Yeah.
and indeed they did. But look, like, they worked together for years on that case. So it is, the more I look, the less I know.
Is it as simple as just the stake that the EEOC has? Like, let's say DFA is successful, we're to be successful in this, and then DFA settles with Activision Blizzard for like $1 billion, something way higher. Is it as simple as the embarrassment that would come to the EEOC from their settlement being so small and maybe make them look bad? Is that what we're possibly dealing with here?
I don't think so, because, and this goes back to Shannon's really excellent question about the overall size of the settlement. EEOC is typically deployed like a scalpel, right? Like, they come in, and you and I talked about this in terms of the non-monetary relief that's a part of that settlement as well, right? That's the thing the EEOC does really, really well, setting up an outside commission of independent lawyers who are going to review Activision's hiring practices going forward. So usually there's not that kind of competitiveness of like, oh, state agency got a much bigger settlement. Well, of course they did, right? Because the state agency covers a larger pool of employees. The EEOC wants to set prospective policy going forward. Again, you can put an asterisk on that. They're obviously also, interested in getting money, but I don't know.
I just wanted to add some context to this. So like the EEOC settlement with Activision Blizzard, it was going to be $18 million. They're about to sign this deal. It was supposed to happen. They already announced it, and then it's been weeks and weeks of silence, right? And so that money was already supposedly on the table. And then the DFA is actually the type of organization that also is going after Riot Games and asking for $400 million. So it seems like they are taking these larger swings and tend to do that. And do you think, I think there's like 2 questions in here, but one of them is, do you think that it's like a philosophical difference between like these 2 organizations, like 2 agencies, that the EEOC just wants to go for the smaller amounts of money and see what they can get, and the DFA is more of like, I'm going to make history if I can?
So, I mean, I think I have a version of the answer, my previous answer on that, right? Which is, I don't know that it is so much of a difference in philosophy as how the expertise breaks down in terms of overlapping jurisdiction, right? Remember, right, DFA is a state agency, and when you think about employment, right, that's typically state issue, right? It is the kind of thing, you live in California, you work for a California company, your job is in California. That tends to be where people tend to think of and go for remedy. And then when you think about like what the role of a federal agency be, well, the role of a federal agency would be to ensure uniformity of practice, right, across multiple jurisdictions, and to say, yeah, we see these cases all the time, and here are the best practices. When a company has a history of against pregnant employees, for example, in terms of promotion and salary and bonuses and that sort of thing. Here's some of the hidden biases that we've seen in cases from across the country that we can help put into a regulatory oversight regime that can stop that from happening again.
Got it. And then I think the other thing that people were suspecting was the EEOC is corrupt and working with Activision Blizzard to get the company out of the whole situation, which is there isn't much evidence to that, but there is the fact that this whole situation could be making it easier for Activision to defer the case against DFA. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, like that went through my head too, right? Whenever you see something that feels like a sweetheart deal, it's tempting to say, you know, did somebody call somebody else and pull strings? I can tell you all of the players, everybody I've looked at, seem to be lifelong public servants who have fought tirelessly and, by the way, taken jobs at government agencies that are a fifth of what they would be earning in the private sector, right? So, you know, not devoting their life and their talents to this, but materially foregoing, you know, thousands of dollars a year in compensation. It's hard. I think these are all well-meaning people with a history of working for working people on their side. It doesn't make it impossible that somewhere in the fix is in, but it doesn't feel that way to me.
Maybe somebody's really into Warcraft or something. I don't. It's hard to.
Yeah, no. Bobby Kotick is going to reveal that he's taking control of the EEOC tomorrow. He's going to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm in charge of that now too."
What?
But yeah.
it could be. I mean, what's weird is so the counter argument to the point that I just made, and again, you hear this, I just don't know, and I wish I did, right? The counter argument is, yeah, if you're really that concerned about the women who worked at Activision, why not keep all of this out of your court filings, right? Like, if you've got a dispute back and forth about, you know, attorney 1 and attorney 2 and how much work did they do, well, like, get together, sit down at a table, and like figure this out before you put it in a pleading where I can look at it, right? And again, I represent small businesses, right? Like, we do this kind of stuff all the time. When you say, like, okay, you know, if you say X, you will never be able to unsay X, right? And now you have a situation where, and this is the reality. DFA has said attorneys 1 and 2 did not work substantially or personally on the EEOC's investigation of Activision Blizzard. And the EEOC has said attorneys 1 and 2 have personally and substantially worked on our investigation of Activision Blizzard. So one of those two are wrong, and possibly lying, and that's a hard spot to be in, you know.
So I mean, all that in mind, and the kind of like questions surrounding this also in mind, like, is this basically everything Activision Blizzard could have hoped for in terms of kind of, you know, being able to, like, not like out of jail free card, but, you know, basically being able to take a reprieve from all of this? Or is it still facing, you know, kind of, no matter what the outcome of all of this is, a fairly like long uphill battle?
This is everything and more that Activision could have hoped for, right? Because we are not talking about the substance of the underlying claims. Look, the story wasn't going away no matter what, right? But now, instead of talking about, like, did overwhelmingly male employees at the Blizzard subdivision of Activision keep copious quantities of alcohol in their cubicles and, you know, engage in like frat party rituals of cube crawls from back to back, where, you know, if women didn't play along, they were considered not team players, right? Like, that's gross. We're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about, you know, the esoteric of lawyers who left one department, who left one federal government agency or a state agency. So, number one, it shifted the focus. Number two, it has opened the door for a technical argument that that Activision can make without looking unsympathetic, right? Like, there are a lot of things, you know, you might want to challenge in a case if you are a defendant in a sexual discrimination and sexual harassment lawsuit, like you might decide not to contest certain facts because the act of contestation itself looks bad and causes your stock to tank 20% every time you state it in public. You know, think about like the first public letter that Activision put out that went over real badly, right? But to say, hey, we didn't come up with any of this. We have a government agency saying you might have improper documents, and all we want to do is pause this litigation and figure out what's going on. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward argument to make. And you know, and it's an argument that the EEOC handed Activision on a silver platter.
But is the best case for Activision Blizzard still that original settlement though? It's not like, would this jeopardize the $18 million settlement? Or is that like the bottom line?
No,
can't get any better
no, nothing. Right. So yeah, that's an excellent point. There is nothing to suggest that the EEOC investigation could be unwound or undone. And you still have the union request, which I believe will be granted for a fairness hearing on the substance of the $18 million in the EEOC settlement. So I think that's a great kind of classic Thomas optimism point there. That we're not in a situation where it's likely that Activision is going to walk on everything, but it does throw a cloud over the California investigation, which is broader, more wide-ranging, appears to address more people. And if you care, so you know, it's really kind of a question of, you know, which component of this do you care about more? Obviously, you care about both. Fixing Activision for the future, right? Putting new rules into place. That's something I think the EEOC settlement really does a good job on. You also care about making plaintiffs whole, right? Like fixing the damage that was done to the women who really worked at Activision for a period of time and, you know, were subject to degrading conditions and for promotion and paid lower salary. So, you know, that's those view first is not really in jeopardy, but it's that second component that's been thrown into disarray.
So related to the EEOC specifically, A's Theros in chat, I think they say their name, I have no idea. Kind of reads like Azeroth, which is the main location in World of Warcraft, so that's bitterly ironic. Let's see. So they say, might the EEOC be culturally less inclined to extract blood from an employer at this point? I think I've heard that post-Enron, agencies reckoned with the impact of destroying Arthur Ander.
Oh, Arthur Anderson.
Arthur Anderson,
yeah, Anderson.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I mean, I've never worked at the EEOC, so you know, I wouldn't be able to from that perspective. I would sort of default back to the way in which these cases get staffed is that they are, you typically will have 4 or 5 attorneys that have come over to the EEOC of varying levels of seniority. And then you have, you know, one lead trial attorney, and then you have, you know, the boss who's calling the shots. That's Anna Park in this case, who, you know, kind of supervises all of those trials. And I will tell you that, again, my experience with government investigatory bodies and regulatory bodies is that those people tend to be very, very proud of what they do. And they're litigators on top of it. So they're super competitive. So, you know, there examples, counterexamples. You know, for example, the TC's antitrust division under Reagan and George W. Bush. You know, those people took pride in not opening investigations, and that was part of a culture from the top down. I don't think there's something comparable here. It's an interesting point, but I tend to to err on the side of, look, if you really want to be pro corporate and evil, there are a lot better ways outside the EEOC of doing that than like staying a mole in the EEOC and, slightly sabotaging one settlement, 10 years later. That seems pretty yeah.
I'm just curious, like ultimately, where this what was the next step? Was that California would apply to the EEOC, and so now that California has replied, what happens next?
Yeah, so we have two different tracks. The first is we're watching to see what the state court does with Activision's motion to stay the proceedings. And again, this is one of those where either set of allegations would ordinarily be enough for me to say, yep, you're going to win on that side, right? So Activision saying a federal government agency has suggested that this investigation was the result of something that may be potentially unethical attorney conduct. Let's pause and figure that out. Ordinarily, I'd say you're going to win that. On the other hand, the state agency has said, we've submitted the affidavits that said these people did nothing wrong. There's no violation. There's no reason to stop this case from going forward. Again, ordinarily, a court would say, yeah, if a lawyer comes into court and signs a document under penalty of perjury that says, I didn't do that, that's usually the end of it, right? And in fact, DFA's brief, in the state court brief, we could quote it here, takes that position, right? Says if Activision wishes to dispute the sworn testimony under oath of an officer of the court, it is free to pursue whatever remedy that law may have, right? Like that is yeah, come on, we don't slow this down when people make insane harebrained claims. So
yeah, that's like is that like a legal like come at me, bro?
It really is. Yeah, it is. We don't
joke
get
on our
to
show. Andrew will be like, "Oh, the lawyer's really letting loose here," and the quote is like, "Oh, we have the position that you're wrong," and he's like, "I've never seen this kind of incivility in a lawyer before." but one what you just said, that again, yes, they've gone on record with the affidavit swearing whatever, but the other side is also the government going on record in a lawsuit, right? The other side is just the EEOC saying the opposite, right? So it's hard to be like, hey, this is the gospel truth because some government officials swore an affidavit.
Yeah, that is correct. The only thing that inclines me in favor of the DFA position is that the EEOC is not a party to the state proceedings and has no desire to be a party in the state proceedings. So, in other words, what you were pitting up against is not DFA versus the EEOC, but rather DFA versus Activision's construal of what the EEOC has said. And I think in that case, right, they're going to have to decide whether to stay the proceedings or not. My guess, gun to my head, I would say 70-30, 60-40 that motion gets denied. But it's way closer than it ought to be, right? Like there's a realistic chance that lawsuit gets put on hold because of what the EEOC has done. And then the interesting question is the parties briefing DFA's motion to intervene in the federal case. And we're still waiting on that. We're going to see all of these allegations play out again, and we're going to see the nested levels of allegations, right? Like because, we've just seen for the first time DFA saying, hey, man, we gave you these affidavits on October 5. What gives you going in court on October 8 and pretending like you never saw that? Well, the EEOC will have an answer to that. We haven't even talked about the Rule 4.3 solicitation by one of the DFA lawyers. I open up an entire additional can of worms. But basically, every lawyer who's ever worked on this for either agency is now having their conduct scrutinized, through a microscope to see if there's an advantage to be gained here in litigation. And again, it just sort of goes back to, I was so gratified, Shannon, that the first pull quote you took from me on the article earlier in the week was, this is ugly and weird, because I don't think, like, we're a week later and it's still ugly and weird.
Yeah. Well, actually, to go to Shannon's story for a second, Shannon, I know that you've also been talking to Activision Blizzard employees who are, still in the thick of it. How are they generally feeling about this? Has this been kind of a blow to morale in terms of them, getting what they ultimately want out of the company?
Yeah, Activision Blizzard employees, a lot of them that I spoke to are, aligned with the CWA, the Communications Workers Alliance, and DIFA, and the fact that they want to see more money than the $18 million. So they're really siding with that. I think the whole EEOC settlement came out of the blue, and the employees wanted to have more of a say, and to at least know about the settlement, and then at least like be consulted about it, which they weren't. So there was a sense of like having to go back and challenge that. And now with this ongoing court battle, I think a lot of the employees were frustrated and, and tired to hear about this, because it again goes back to what Andrew was saying, where we stopped talking about what's happening with workers and their pay inequality and the sexual harassment and discrimination they face, and we are instead talking about how how DIFA and the EEOC may have had two lawyers, who like switched jobs, and maybe that's an ethical concern, and now it's a completely different conversation. So seems like a big distraction to those employees at Activision Blizzard who want the focus to be on the victims instead.
Right. So I do wonder, and this is kind of a galaxy brain idea, so stick with me for a moment. But I do wonder if on some level, like maybe this injection of unprecedented, but nonetheless like novel action in the case kind of catapults it back into the headlines in a way that ultimately keeps people's eyes on it. Even if like it's unfortunately no longer about the employees at the moment, it still like keeps people interested in like wanting to see what happens next, which may not necessarily have been the case if things just proceeded apace as they seemed like they're going to.
I don't know about that, because in the past few weeks the SEC has come out investigating Activision Blizzard,
Mhm.
the NLRB. There's a complaint against Activision Blizzard. I think this story has never gone away, really, and I think that this particular chapter of it might be very dense for the average viewer. I'm not sure if people really are going to be super engaged in this legal battle, and they are riveted by every turn. But
Our
let me
stream
know.
audience begs to differ.
I was gonna say
They
on our
are.
show, it's sort of evidence of that. I mean, Andrew's explained this like 3 times. I'm like, okay, so who's DeFi? What? Every time. But I think I finally have a handle on it. But I gotta say,
Yeah.
once a settlement is finally approved, I think that'll be. I would think, regardless of what happens now, when a settlement is finally approved, I would imagine we're gonna get all the headlines of, bam, 19, whatever, 18 million, or if the DeFi one comes in bigger, and you'll get that. I imagine the body of the story would have counts and reasons why they were forced to settle. So that all back in that thing.
Right.
I'll just say really quickly that we can look at Riot Games for like a timeline example. I mean, they had a lawsuit come out in 2018. That was a huge story back then, and then they were going to settle for $10 million, and then DIFA said you should give us $400 million, and Riot was like, no. And then they started to have like a back and forth there, and that's still an ongoing process where they can't come to agreement, and it's now been 3 years later. So that could just drag things out longer. Maybe eventually when Riot reaches a settlement, if they do, that would be a story, but I don't know how long that would be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things where I feel like, the kind of optimal outcome for Activision Blizzard workers would be that people, general populace, continues to care about their plight, because I think that any pressure that goes off of Activision Blizzard, that helps Activision Blizzard. That means that the people are no longer paying attention to that element of things, and ultimately for a company like Activision Blizzard, a major part of this is the money they're making and their public perception as a company. Like I think that's what they're probably worried about in the grander scheme of all of this. And right now it seems like people are still very generally like, not opposed to Activision Blizzard necessarily, but like are being given pause about buying their games, supporting them, publicly saying like, I'm a fan of this company, so on and so forth. And if all of that goes away, then I think maybe they have an easier path toward kind of rehabilitating their image without necessarily making needed changes. But I guess we'll see based on also how the league play out.
Yeah, I think all of that is correct. And without setting aside being slightly hurt that people don't appreciate the same level of minutiae and detail, I'll say this. If you read the DFEH complaint, and even if you read the EEOC complaint, it is possible to construct a narrative that says essentially this is a Blizzard problem, right? And Activision bought Blizzard, and yeah, there's some other, by and large, this was a problem at Blizzard, and being able to maintain that kind of dichotomy, I think, is key, to what you were just talking about in terms of a company being able to rehabilitate its image, have people want to wear its T-shirts again and buy its products and support it and that sort of thing. And all of that, right? The question of, is this a Blizzard problem or is this an Activision problem? That, yeah, okay, it was worse. The pub crawls, cubicle crawls were a Blizzard problem. Here are 600 Activision employees that predate the Blizzard acquisition, right? That all kind of comes down to the information that we haven't seen, and we're just trying to piece together from, tertiary sources. So I look to, for me, that big moment is going to be if and when the federal court sets the fairness hearing date in the federal EEOC lawsuit. If they grant, and I believe they will set a fairness hearing because the union, the precedent seems pretty strong that they can come in and request that, and that, that's not a just motion to shorten time. Like, put that one on your calendars and attend that one, because that is going to have the substantive information we're looking for.
Do you think it will take an investigation to figure out if these two lawyers did violate any ethical, if the allegations of ethical violations are substantial or not? Would that take, I don't know, like, how do you?
So ordinarily, the way you would go about proving that is via affidavit, right? You could have a hearing and you could bring in these lawyers' immediate supervisor over the time period at which they were at the EEOC. For one of them, again, she came directly out of a clerkship, a federal clerkship, was there for 2 years. And then was a staff attorney at the EEOC for 3 years, and then moved up to sort of senior trial attorney. The other one was in that senior trial attorney role for 19 years. And like I said, tried at least one major case reporting directly to Anna Park, right? So I realize I'm not quite answering your question.
But also, does the agreement they have to share completely negate this anyway, or not?
That does, in my view, that's responsive to the question of what is the harm that Activision suffered, right? Because if at the end of the day you say, fine, our lawyers behaved unethically, but nobody got anything that they weren't entitled to, so we're not going to throw this, off the rails.
Sorry
that
if this
may
is not
be
making sense, but how would the lawyers have even been behaving unethically if there was an agreement to share information?
Because you can still behave unethically if there is an agreement to share documents, but not an agreement to share impressions, decisions, right? Other aspects of attorney work product, right? And if it was very, very clear, again, we're sort of hitting to the margins, but you think about it in terms of a private client, right? Like if I work in IBM's legal department, and then I leave and I go over to the FCC, right? In addition to taking documents from IBM that they would want to stop, they might like want to pump me for, hey, what's the attitude in IBM's legal department about, like, if you were to get served with a complaint, like, how much are they going to fight that versus how much are they going to cower? Those kinds of impressions are the things that senior attorneys will formulate impressions, have notes, that could prejudice right down the line. Now, once you start putting this in the context of this investigation, it's harder to come up with where that prejudice would be. But I don't want to say that it's definitely a zero. There's some. And again, I think we're going to look at sort of ideas, and it might be you might have to bring in a witness and just cross-examine them, right, and say, how many cases did this, right? Like, what role did the legal department play vis-a-vis the investigatory division? Those are the questions.
Better hope you don't check their Insta and you find a bunch of pictures. I'm in the investigation division. Let's do some more investigation of social media.
Got it. So I'll be in touch in a couple weeks when this happens again.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever
I'll be on dry land then. So,
well, here's hoping anyway. I've heard about people getting stuck on cruise ships.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Or maybe you'll just
I've even considered the scenario until now. Thank you.
Maybe what will happen is maybe you'll get on of your own free will. You'll disembark, today, I guess, and realize that you just missed the sea. You no longer like dry land, that you're ready to just full on become a boatsman. Become a fish. Yes. Not where I was going with that, but yes. Like many 8-year-olds,
he'll be a sailor outfit. Yeah.
Are you going to sing Brandy to me here?
I could. I love to do that song karaoke.
All right. There we go.
But yeah, on that wonderful note, I think that we are going to proceed into the second portion of our show where we recap a bunch of other stories. So in the meantime, it was good having both of you on. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to plug your show and other things, feel free.
Absolutely. Please listen to Opening Arguments. It's a twice a week podcast that has the kind of deep dive you heard here. I mean, it's that, and it's explaining stories in the news. Is very good at explaining complex legal topics and breaking them down. And then I play the part of the layperson to try to make sure the audience is hopefully able to keep up with this, because it's really complicated stuff, as we've seen here. I mean, it's hard to keep this all straight. So that's what our show tries to do. So just search Opening Arguments in any of your podcasty thingies that you use to listen to podcasts.
All right. Well, with all that said, y'all can depart when you please. You are no longer trapped here. Don't have to go home, but it can't stay here, right?
You're still stuck in a boat though, Andrew. You can't leave that boat.
That's
I mean, you could just jump over. But anyway.
Too bad. All right. Bye.
Thank you all
so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Now we're going to move into the second portion of our show. So don't leave. But yeah, so we're about to roll into the second portion of our show where we break some of their story of the week in a more rapid fire fashion. Sans guests using merely our powers of journalistic investigation and understanding, as opposed to fancy legal expertise or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just a regular Southern journalist. Don't got any of your fancy law degrees.
Oh God. Okay, moving on.
Yes. Let's see. In further news this week, a number of things have happened. One of the stories that I sort of worked on that ended up being a little bit more reported out than I thought it would be is about recent video game delays, which there have been many. And so that inspired this headline for Video Games February is the new November. This week, the big delay was Elden Ring, which is the new game from the director of Dark Souls, Hidetaka Miyazaki, working in conjunction with George R.R. Martin. Though George R.R. Martin mostly just contributed like world building and lore, less, I don't think he was really in the trenches of development in the way that people thought he was. But anyway, that got delayed to February, and so it joins Horizon Forbidden West, which is a big PlayStation game, Saints Row, which is a revamp, a reboot, whatever you want to call it, of a beloved kind of open world city series. And then Destiny 2, The Witch Queen, which is a big, maybe the biggest expansion that Destiny 2 has yet had. And those are just the big ones. There's also Dying Light too, to expand things out a little bit further. Into the kind of late months of January, you also get Rainbow Six Extraction and Pokemon Arceus, I guess how you say that. So yeah, it's going to be like a jam-packed couple of months, kind of taking the
Great.
place of what would normally be the holiday season, right? Are you excited to be poor? Are you excited to spend all your money?
Yeah, I'm excited to, I don't know, just like never take my eyes off the screen and fall into some dark holes every
Oh
weekend.
man, your eyes are gonna get blue light damage.
Oh no.
Better buy some of those glasses that don't work.
I already have some.
Then you better wear them. Like glasses really don't work. But yeah, like so basically, there's one of those where on one hand, like it's definitely a big thing. A lot of these games were slated to come out during holiday season, which is basically upon us. They're now not, but at the same time, it's sort of something that's already been happening over the course of the past few years anyway. As industry analyst Morgan Pachter pointed out, it had already happened with the Far Cry series a couple of times. And then there are a lot of other popular games that are smaller that have come out outside of the holiday window in the past handful of years. Valheim this year, Fall Guys last year, so on and so forth. Among Us also took over Fall Guys is like the party game du jour, and it came out in June 2018. Let's see. Oh wow. As Theros in chat just asked about Concerned Ape's announcement of his new game, Haunted Chocolatier. I didn't even know that Concerned Ape announced the new game today. That's exciting. I'm actually gonna let's see. That's basically my summary of this story. Well, that and like the other reason for the delays is obviously COVID, stuff like that. Games as a service. Basically, just games are coming out more and more frequently at other times in the year than just the holiday season, even though the holiday season is still notably a time when people spend more money on games. This is an interesting chart that I've always enjoyed. This is from the NPD, which is a pretty good. No, don't want to allow all. Why is it doing this? Hate.
To allow. You can't get it in if you don't allow.
Oh god. Okay. Well, anyway, this is from the NPD, or rather, the source is the NPD. I think Statista made the actual chart, but NPD is a an entity that measures video game sales. And if you look at this, like the red bars for the holiday months are November and December. So even though the number is going down, it's still a market increase in terms of spending compared to the rest of the year on video games.
Yeah, you can prove this out by going to a GameStop in November, and you'll see all these like moms coming in, like, "What should I buy my child? Need help."
Right. Please give me game. I am mom. Give game. But yeah, no. All right. So with that out of the way, I do want to look at the new Concerned Ape game, because Stardew Valley is obviously beloved and kind of changed the trajectory of video games when it came out. So Chocolatier. I hope it's another. I think I probably misspelled that. Whatever. Here we go. Here's Concerned Ape's Twitter. Working on Haunted Chocolatier. Wow. A gameplay video, you say?
Wow.
So what do we got here? Oh, it has smooth.
Oh, this looks cozy.
Now wait, this looks like Stardew Valley.
But in winter.
Oh, but you're a chocolatier? Is that kind of the setup?
And it's haunted.
We cannot forget that it's haunted.
Oh, you are making chocolate. Okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
I hope any game where you make any kind of food, but sure.
Right, that's why you're getting back into Animal Crossing, right?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, and you kill slimes. Very nice.
I mean, very Stardew. I guess you kill them outside of the mines, though. That's new. But yeah, so this feels like a Stardew spin-off. That's what I'm guessing they're kind of going for here. I wonder if at some point this was like going to be expansion content, and then Concerned Ape was like, wait a minute, I can just expand this into its own game.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, little ghost friends. That's great.
The bar, truffle, simple chocolate.
I'm looking at ghosts, and you're like, chocolate. More chocolate.
Yeah. Oh, so you received my invitation? No, this is great. This is great.
Yeah, this looks really nice.
It's like the big city. It's crusty.
There are pros and cons. answer. Whoa, secret lab.
Oh, this guy that's really good art.
Yeah. Oh wow, this guy looks evil, probably.
He must be our new Chocolatier. What's he gonna do to you?
Yeah, no, James Jackson says it's apparently running on the same engine as Stardew Valley, and I believe it. I mean,
Oh,
just
makes
look
sense.
at it.
Yeah, you can probably
It
save
looks exactly the
reasons.
same in terms of like art style and fidelity.
Yeah, like why rebuild a platform when you already have one that works?
Right, exactly. Yeah, this looks really neat though. I am very excited. Oh wow. And first response, new
Of
crushes
course.
just dropped.
Of course.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Let's see, are these good new crushes? I would say yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, solid ones. I know that like within a week of release, modders are going to add better portraits. Because they always do that with these kinds of games. So these are great responses. They look great, but all I see is that's phenomenal. Well, yeah, that game looks really cool. Thank you, chat, for making us aware of it. Other things that have happened. Oh yeah, League of Legends Worlds going on.
yeah,
And
it
you
was
have
in
some thoughts on
store.
this.
Worlds is happening, happens every single year. The story is always the same, but this time I finally got to write it, so that is different. I always had the story in my mind, and last year I couldn't write it. I got to interview Double F though, and then I took a quote from what he said last year. It's still relevant this year because it literally never changed. China, Korea always dominate. The US and Canada have never won a single Worlds. They have never even made it to top 2. The best they ever did was top 3. And Faker is one of the last living legends. He won 3 world titles, and this is his chance to win a 4th one.
Yeah, which would be, I mean, can anybody lay claim to even a similar record, or is it just like
No, nobody else has. Like even like all the Chinese teams, nobody's won more than 1 world title. And Europe definitely not. And then so T1 is oh no. What is this?
This is a no hopium zone.
Oh my god. Oh, it's great. I was like, what are you looking for? I know. Okay, but yeah, so another thing is that, as all esports go, the older you get, then the closer you are to retirement. And
Right.
then new people, new on the block come in and they are dominating you. So when I interviewed Showmaker, who's now the arguably best League of Legends player, however you want to quantify that, he's like saying all these things like, yeah, if you're older, you're not as good. Yeah, I'm ready to like. I'm not even intimidated by Faker anymore. Like I'm such a pro.
Wow.
And he's just like saying all these like things, and we'll see like who actually can live up to their word. But
Yeah, those are fighting words, though. I mean, like those are fighting words, even by the standards of the least civil lawyer that you would ever hear.
yeah. And also the other thing to just point out is that they work these terrible hours. They wake up at 9 a.m. to game until 1 a.m. every day, and that's in addition to competing.
Yeah, that's bonkers. And I mean, that's like a big part of the reason why players end up like retiring in, like their mid or late 20s, right? Because you can only do that for so long. And like I think that maintaining that kind of schedule definitely relies on youth. Like I know somebody who crested the terrible bridge into my 30s. I cannot stay up that way anymore. I can't like put that kind of on something and not rest without feeling just like a pile of garbage the next day.
Yeah, I didn't ask about I don't know, resting or gym schedules. I just asked about gaming schedules. So that already seems like a full, I don't know, 14 hours. There doesn't seem to be much more time left after that.
Yeah. It's wild. Not my sympathies to all these people because they're succeeding at a high level and good for them. But I hope that they take care of themselves and that they don't encounter a slew of serious health issues as their lives go on.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I asked them about mental health, and I don't know if they are
Oh
looking
man.
out for that.
Oh yes, I fooled. Okay, Washington Post game, an account I've never heard of. Yeah, no way you're past 30.
That might be Hawken. I don't know. I'm guessing it might be Hawken.
Doesn't matter who it is. Tricked someone.
Hawken is very young though, so he probably just thinks everyone is young. Okay, well, moving on.
All right, so let's see other stories. Um, let's see quickly. I just wanted to highlight because we published this at the end of last week, so to me it
Mhm.
counts as a this week's story.
Yeah, of course.
I ended up doing a story about an element of the Twitch leak that I think got a lot of attention, which is Twitch's leaked do not ban list, which came out as a part of the very large Twitch leak from a couple weeks ago, in which someone basically dropped like 125 some odd gigabytes of data from Twitch, including source code, onto the internet. Um, and yeah, so this list on its face seems really bad. Like there are people who are just beyond reproach, and the rules don't apply to them. Whatever. The truth is a little bit less exciting and also simpler. The basic idea is that it was in place to, for one, it's like 5 years out of date, so it no longer is part of the platform at all. And for two, it was more of a means of just like ensuring that admins do things that were kind of banning each other or banning Twitch staff or banning streamers that had alternative context within the company for who should be handling their particular cases if they broke the rules. That said, there were in certain cases instances of favoritism because this kind of a structure just sort of means that that's possible to do. And that's, gonna happen in those cases, especially when it was a company as small as Twitch was at the time, and with so much like interoperability between staff and between streamers. But yeah, I mean, like broadly, it was mainly for like, for example, if someone was streaming IRL, it was a time at which that wasn't really allowed. So the basic idea is that you could have like alternative rule sets and say, okay, Tim the Tap Man can do IRL streams. He doesn't have to stream video games, that kind of a thing. So yeah, just the thing that I think was worth correcting the record on, because people passed this list around being like, oh my God, this is proof that, Twitch operates purely on favoritism. Like, certainly there is favoritism within the company in terms of like who, gets to stay on the platform after they violated the rules a number of times. And like, I think that while it's not, I've never been able to pin down if this is a hard and fast rule or not, but there is like a thing where if you are not a partner and you like get banned or suspended 3 times, then you're permanently banned probably. Whereas partners get at least 6 chances. So, already different rule sets there, but it's not quite as stark as people seem to think. And in this day and age, there's an entirely different system in place that means that when people are given extra slack, basically like you can't hide it from other Twitch employees. Like everyone now is able to see via a customer relationship management system. So like things are more standardized and are rooted in rules as opposed to like kind of a janky list of exceptions.
Yeah, Twitch used to be so much more corporate. I know I talked to a couple of
Wait, do you mean less corporate?
I mean Twitch has got to be so corporate.
Okay.
And actually for Twitch employees like a couple of years ago, maybe like 2019, 2020, 2019 actually, and they were also like, oh yeah, we made so many exceptions for the top streamers, and it seemed a little unfair, but
Yeah, I mean the telling quote there is from a former Twitch admin that I talked to. He said, "I do remember Rice Gun and Tyler One both being given way more grace than they should have been, and if one of us admins reported them, the partner contact team anyway, we were told to kick rocks and pay attention to the do not ban list. It wasn't quite a get out of jail free card, but there were clearly some streamers who got treated with more chances or abilities than others, which again is I think more of a rarity these days. But that's not to say it doesn't happen, right? It's just that like, and this is one of those things where, and I wish I'd conveyed this a little bit better in the story, but I think that when you build a platform with systems like this, even when you remove those systems, the elements of them move forward, right? And so if you build a platform on the idea that there will be leniency granted to certain people and not others, then even when you remove the system that enables that, it's still kind of an idea that percolates around the platform and in other systems that were structured around that one that you removed. Like you can't just wholesale rip that out of the DNA of something you built, if it was such a big part of it for such a long time. So anyway,
that's true.
Yeah, that was just a story that I feel like needed telling because people sort of misunderstood what was going on. Let's see other things from this week because I think we're running low on time. I'm gonna skip that guy over there because it's just more Ubisoft being bad stuff. So this week, XQC went on Hassan Piker's stream and talked about how the Overwatch curtailed unionization for its really early on in the process. Like there was a media day that I actually attended when it happened. I didn't know about this part though.
Now,
Where I'll let him explain.
Right.
It.
Yeah. So we all signed our contracts with our own company, and then went to the opening media day, right, with the Overwatch League, and then they give us these big ass contracts at the end of the conference, right, where every player had to sign to really like accept the official like Overwatch League agreements or whatever, right? And then there's a document was huge, big ass pile document, and not everybody agreed with everything that was a document. We're like, this is kind of stupid. And then people started bringing up in the room like, guys, maybe we should like unionize or talk about this, right? And then they're like, oh yeah, maybe we should like unionize, right? And then they were like, oh, yo, you know what? You have a 24 hour to sign. You have to sign now. And everybody just signed it, right? And that was the end of it. And they've been talking about unionizing for years, and it never happened.
Yep, that's how it works. Companies will do everything and anything.
now it's
Yeah. So basically, yeah, like pretty sketchy stuff. And it's the sort of thing where, you know, XQC is not always a reliable narrator. So I checked with some other people who were in the league at the time. Only one of them got back to me, but he was like, yep, that's how it happened. He was like, there were no lawyers in the room either. It was just like they set him down with contracts and said, you got like an hour, either sign or
rough,
don't.
too. Like, also, how are they going to unionize? Like, players, or are they employees? Are they contractors? Like, that's going to be a whole other can of worms too. So, yeah, well, it's a good catch. This clip.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, there are a lot of questions. I think there have been for a long time of like why esports players don't unionize or make players associations or whatever. And I think a lot of that is tied up in the fact that these are like often young people who are getting what they view to be a dream job, and they don't want to like bite the hand that feeds. They're just like, I get paid to play video games. This is what I've always wanted. This is what I've been training for years. So I'm just going to go in and do it and not worry about any of the attendant issues like getting paid. If I'm good enough, I'll get paid what I deserve. Meritocracy thinking. But there are also things like this happening behind the scenes where companies will, you know, very pointedly curtail efforts to unionize just by putting people in situations where they don't have a choice.
Yeah, I've done stories about like esports, like kids who are players who end up winning like a large amounts of money and then having to sign away most of their winnings because of the contract they had.
Jeez. Yeah, that's terrible. Let's see other things that have happened this week that are worth running down really quick.
Like 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Oh man. Okay. Lightning round. Oh no. Let's see. Okay. So
make it worse.
So a story that I'm still reporting out, but that I think is worth touching on, is that this week Valkyrae, who is one of the biggest streamers on YouTube, put out a skincare line, which is meant to protect users from quote unquote blue light pollution. There's been a lot of backlash to it because basically people are like, blue light pollution is not real. People have called it a scam and things like that. I've been talking to experts about this, and they contend more or less that like, yeah, it's probably not actually a thing of consequence. The idea being that like screens that we use, computers, phones, whatever, emit quote unquote blue light, which they do. Blue light also is emitted by the sun. And so people are like, oh, well, you know, if the sun and like its light ages you over time and like messes with your skin, then I guess computers probably do the same thing, right? But that is hyper oversimplifying the way that like sunlight works. Sunlight contains many different forms of light. And then also screens are not very big. And so they just don't impact us in the same way that the sun would. And so this is kind of an instance of a major gaming influencer leaning into what I think a lot of other influencers have leaned into over time, which is wellness trends and kind of, you know, products that are not really founded in actual science. The experts agree pretty unanimously that like at the very least there needs to be more research into this before people start making products to, you know, protect people against it. As James Jackson in chat just said, snake oil.
Right. Yeah, I would just say that I have a lot of skincare products. I maybe have like, I don't know, 100 skincare products, and I don't have any blue light products. I think I've seen this before, and I was like, no reason to do this, so I'll skip this.
Yeah, it's definitely it seems like something that, again, in the very least needs to be researched more, and the research that already exists points to the idea that this is not really a thing of consequence, that you don't really need to apply these particular things in order to protect your skin from your screens. And actually then going through the, like, I talked to one dermatologist and like read her all the ingredients in Valkyrae's product, and she's like, yeah, most of this products and some kind of like actual physical blocker within them, it's not going to defend you anyway. That's not how it works. Like it has all these antioxidants and things that would like, you know, maybe lessen damage over time, but they won't protect you in the moment. It's just like regular skincare stuff. So it's probably not dangerous, but it's also like, you know, it's one of those things where a lot of Valkyrae's fans are likely, you know, teenage girls, young women, people who worry about aging, even though they are very young, and like would be very susceptible to something like this. And so I think that's why people are mad at Valkyrae. And she is, as far as I know, yet to really seriously address this. I think she did a tweet on her private account very briefly, but like she deleted it and it wasn't really anything. So yeah, it's not ideal. Let's see. Quick other things. There have been some really fun things happening in MMOs this week. In New World, because of like terrible money anti-inflation, people have started a bar system. People just trading some servers, just trading linen, ore, and eggs, because like they're basically, yeah, like the ways of creating coins in game, monster drops, salvage, and quests don't offer enough rewards to counterbalance the number of coins being used. So people are like, well, barter system. So that's really funny. I love it when players come up with stuff like that. And then even better, Star Citizen now has, okay, needle-based PvP where players go around overdosing each other.
What?
Yeah, because basically there are areas in the game where you're not allowed to PvP. But if you heal a player through an involuntary needle injection, it's not seen as PvP. So you can do that to the point that they overdose and die, and then you can take their stuff. And so there's a meta for it now. Players have started countering this by pre-dosing with an anti-overdose medicine before entering player hubs. But even if you get stabbed enough, it's lights out.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing I would do. Yeah, well, I go around robbing people in these games. But yeah.
Yeah. Truly incredible stuff. I love it. You loved it. And now to send it off, here's Austin Powers in Mass Effect.
Is that the kind of person we want protecting the galaxy?
That's the only kind of person who can protect the galaxy.
I'll make the call.
Okay, well,
I
you
get
can
the
enjoy this
feeling
video.
you
I'm
want to
gonna
ask me something.
hop out of here. I'll leave you to watch that. on your own.
Right, just
Bye.
gonna watch this alone. This
Yeah.
beautiful video.
Yeah, I gotta go.
It's really messed up.
Goodbye.
Well, say bye to Austin too.
Oh yeah, bye everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Is there anything you could say about it?
I've got an idea.
Oh wow. Okay, well, on this
Is there a particular
magnificent
topic you
note,
wish to discuss?
this flawless ending,
Like-
perfect conclusion, also go ahead and say farewell to everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We do this every week. My God, I cannot look away from this. This is so perfect. I can't believe how well this is put together. I'm sorry, I need a second. I will finish saying goodbye, but by the way, the YouTuber who made that, this is his handle, Eli_B.wave, which is also amazing. And you should probably check out more of his videos because they seem very funny. Anyway, that's it for me. This has been Washington Post Story Mode. We do this every week at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Always, you know, different subject, different guests based on what the news is, but, you know, same me and also generally Shannon. And yeah, so we'll be back next week. Until then, thanks to everyone who stuck around. And I will see you later. And also, yes, I will drop something in the chat. Anyway,